Hello everyone, I wanted to continue to do some chapter readings from I Was a Doctor in Auschwitz. So here we go. I promise you we're getting near to the very end of the book. The story of Jeanette. Jeanette lived in Block 20 of the concentration camp at Auschwitz. This block, which was like a stable, was the so-called maternity block, where Polish, Ukrainian, Greek, and Yugoslav women prisoners delivered their babies. There, too, the few Jewish women who miraculously were still alive at the time the Nazi chief doctor's order extended the privilege of birth to them delivered their babies. Jeanette was French and a Parisian, but she was very ugly. The city, steeped in coquettish and harmonious beauty, had obviously left no effect on her. She remained ugly. Her features were hard and masculine, and her quarrelsome personality was emphasized by the harsh sandpaper quality of her voice. She seemed to forget that she was surrounded by the constantly burning furnaces where death raged day and night, and she was unaware of the grotesque game being enacted in Block 20 by the perverse Nazi doctors. She considered her pregnancy as something very important and acted as though she were waiting to give birth in some private, elegant clinic in Paris. Each day was marked by new demands and increasing dissatisfaction. Promises could hardly keep her comforted. No one liked her, no one understood her language, and the more she tried to impress her fellow prisoners with her own extraordinary importance and that of her pregnancy, the more the others despised her. But soon it was necessary to give Jeanette all the attention she craved. Her labor pains had started. She was not young anymore. The tenseness of her abdomen and the intensity of her pains were not normal. In Auschwitz, delivery had to proceed quietly. Here, any degree of suffering did not count. Any body condition did not matter. But Jeanette's screams pervaded the camp. "Mon Dieu! Mon Dieu!" she cried, unmindful of her incongruous surroundings. It was an abnormal birth. She gave birth to twins. We had to report this to the chief Nazi doctor, Dr. Mengele, who was on the spot in the cell ironically named delivery room. "Twins! Twins!" he shouted, and this magic word and all its implications reduced him to frantic, maniacal excitement. He paced back and forth in the narrow cell and muttered repeatedly, "At last, the first twins are about to be born here." And this sadist, who seemed to have no other emotions at all, now completely lost his self-control. Dr. Mengele was not only the chief of the crematory but also its scientist. His hobby was twins. Skillful doctors did research under his order and control to explain this secret of nature. His ambition was to multiply the Herrenvolk and to give the German people the greatest manpower through twins. He performed the most execrable research on adult twins, and now he had the source of the secret. The newborn twins. He acted like a scientist who, after much tiring and exhausting research, had at last reached his goal and discovered the heretofore hidden approach to the secret. Ugly Jeanette became really important in Block 20, and Dr. Mengele seemed very polite and thankful to the mother of the twins. He provided a basket for the twins. They received baby shirts. They were even given a blanket to cover their frail bodies. In Auschwitz, the newborn were clad only in dirty rags. Jeanette lay alone on her stretcher, which even had a white sheet, and boasted of her achievement. But the next day, two sinister-looking SS men appeared in the block. "The twins! Where are the twins?" and took them away. Jeanette fought like a lioness, talked incoherently, and bemoaned her children. We tried to console her by saying that perhaps the twins were only to be examined, and that surely they would be returned. The entire maternity ward waited anxiously for the return of the twins. It was night when they were brought back, and thus from day to day, the French twins were taken away every morning and carried to a special laboratory where Dr. Mengele performed his satanic research on them. During these hours, Jeanette cried as only a mother can cry when her children are in great danger. For 14 days this torture of the mother's heart continued, and then one morning we found one of the twins dead. It had died, unable to endure life as a laboratory animal for Dr. Mengele. A few days later, the other little Frenchman followed his brother. He couldn't endure the life of a guinea pig as well. And Jeanette in vain filled the camp of Auschwitz with her cries, "Mes enfants! Mes enfants!" Jeanette was no longer important, and when Dr. Mengele appeared again and found that the twins had died, he became furious and laughingly threw Jeanette into the crematory. The liquidation of Camp C. The carefully planned campaign of exterminating all of Europe's Jewry included, among other things, death by overwork. While the Jews were in the camps, work was only a form of punishment, consisting of carrying stones or dirts from one pile to another and back again. But detachments of prisoners were constantly shipped off to Germany to slave in Nazi war industries. This practice of using Jews, of all people, to help their war effort must have caused much amusement to the higher Nazi circles. Every 6 months, a large number of prisoners left for Germany in the preparation of the liquidation of the various camps. No camp was permitted to function longer than 6 months with the same set of prisoners. When the 6 months were over, the camp was emptied to make room for the new contingent of victims. When the time for the liquidation of Camp C arrived, we knew what was awaiting us, as we had already witnessed the liquidation of the Czechoslovak, the Gypsy, and the Russian camps. There were 32,000 Hungarian Jewish women in Camp C on that cold, rainy October day when our turn came. The process lasted for 4 weeks, and at the end of those 4 weeks, 20,000 had been cremated. 12,000 were sent to work in Germany. Only a few among them were doctors, placed in another camp to continue our miserable existence in Auschwitz. At each morning's roll call, Dr. Mengele arrived, fresh, smiling, whistling an aria from Tosca or the Blue Danube Waltz, which was one of his favorites. Behind him came a detachment of SS men armed with pistols and whips. They surrounded a couple of blocks and ordered the 2,000 or 3,000 women to undress. Completely naked, these unhappy creatures were forced to run between 2 rows of SS men who whipped them just for the fun of it, toward Dr. Mengele, who looked them over one by one and decided whether they should live or die. Those who were too thin, whose skin was covered with sores, whose ankles were swollen, and those whose bodies did not please him, were sent to the left. They were driven, naked as they were, out through the gates of the camp, straight into the furnace. The lucky ones, whose physiques were not yet completely ruined, were sent to the right. They were given a small bundle with a few pieces of bread in it and crowded into transports which carried them off to Germany to work for their worst enemies. The nights we spent in the barrack during those 4 weeks were beyond imagination. Nobody slept, for we knew that every second brought us nearer to eternal sleep. Screams, complaints, prayers filled the air. Some fell prone to attacks of epilepsy and lay writhing on the floor with their mouths foaming. Some beat their heads hysterically against the wall. Some sat motionless, their eyes wide open, yet unconscious of what was going on around them. We ran from block to block, trying to hide from our persecutors. But wherever we were, they always found us, and the only result of our effort was a terrific beating which left us weak and gasping. Who can ever forget those thousands of women who rushed around madly trying to find a loose brick, to break it into pieces and rub the red dust into their cheeks so as to seem strong and healthy when their turn came to face Dr. Mengele? There was no escape. When the 4 weeks were over, the barracks gaped empty into the autumn night, ready to receive another 32,000 Jewish martyrs and house them for an infernal 6 months. The Hungarian Jewish women of Camp C had been taken care of.